We've really got to start, I think, in Gaza. The ceasefire is well and truly over. Israel struck at more than 200 Hamas targets since Friday. Benjamin Netanyahu, well, he had this to say.
I'm saying this very clearly. We are going to continue with the war until we achieve all of its objectives. And you cannot achieve these objectives without continuing the ground maneuver. The ground maneuver was necessary in order to achieve the results we've accomplished so far, and it is required in order to continue to achieve results.
Liz, I'm going to start with you on this one. What's quite clear right now is Israel's ground attacks continue, but Hamas is still clearly in control of key parts of Gaza right now. They're holding hostages underground, so there is no doubt whatsoever that Hamas is still a viable and operating entity.
Oh, 100%. I don't think anybody has that in doubt whatsoever, and that's why Israel has to keep doing what it's doing until, as Netanyahu said, we have very, very clear 3 objectives. It's been that way since October 7. Eliminate Hamas, get all our hostages back, and lastly, ensure that this can never happen again, which means, I guess, really, really thoroughly eliminating Hamas. But I guess my question to that first point is, how do you eliminate what is not just a people group, but an ideology, a way of thinking, a truly held belief, for many a deeply held religious belief, i.e. the eradication of the Jews? And so I fear even once this war is over, it's not over. It never seems to be over when it comes to Israel. It seems to be the ongoing war, generation throughout generation.
Yeah, Carol, I was going to ask you the same question. What does the end of a war of this type, what does it look like? Does it look like peace, or does it just simply look like ongoing terror attacks?
Well, unfortunately for Israel, as we all know, it has endured ongoing terror attacks with only brief pauses since it was first created in 1948. That day it was created, it was invaded by all its surrounding Arab nations. So unfortunately, the war does look like the complete destruction of Hamas. You will never get rid of that sort of extremist Islamist ideology, unfortunately, in that area. Not the way that it's currently mapped out, but it has to be, we have to get rid of Hamas in the same way that ISIS were completely destroyed, ultimately. Okay. And it will be a long war because a lot of the Hamas leaders aren't even in Gaza. They're in other places like Qatar. But Israel has already said it will now get its Mossad agents to track those people down and assassinate them. So it will be a long, ugly war, but there is no other option. When the enemy says October 7 was just a rehearsal, it will commit the same atrocities on Israel 1,000,000 times if it has to.
OK, so then, Paul, if you consider the way in which this war has panned out, the amazing part about it is that Hezbollah has not come across the Lebanese border. Right, and that is one thing that really surprised me, because that was the great conflagration that Iran clearly was banking on when the first attacks came across Israel.
Yeah, the series of dominoes that were expected to have fallen by now have not fallen. Now, obviously, there's support, there's financial, tactical support that's running behind them, more munitions and the rest of it. What I'm fascinated by, sitting back and watching, right, is that obviously, because it is about their existential existence, Israel doesn't care what the rest of the world thinks. They have a task that they are going to do. Now, as we've all discussed, though, the complexities of that task and where that task takes you on the map, I think that people should be being prepared for more like the war on terror, this multifaceted, multi-year, potentially 2-decade thing that goes everywhere from the streets of Gaza to the money of Qatar, which means that as long as the focus remains upon are they shooting or are they not shooting in Gaza, well then Israel ends up on this hiding to nothing in terms of its public relations scenario. But if they can start to reset to say, well, OK, here's the deal. We don't do anything in Gaza if you keep letting people out. Every day you keep letting people out, it's going to be OK. But obviously, it became a trickle. And I've got to say, I've been quite surprised that despite all of the attention and all of the aggro and all of the demands about a humanitarian pause and ceasefire, when there was one, everyone just stopped talking about it, assuming that there'd be no way back to the battlefield, but the reality is something broke down and we're back.
It was the Hamas rockets that broke it down.